Dr. Fayaz Ahmed.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Very glad to meet you.
Same here, sir. Same here. My
You
pleasure.
are you are also a PhD student in HCU.
No, sir. I am an assistant professor of English in Rani Chennamma University.
I
Sorry.
can't
Yeah,
hear
sir.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Now, am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Uh, yes, sir. Thank you. Pleasure is all mine, sir. Thank you. It's it's an honor to come across a scholar like you, and I'm I'm working as an assistant professor of English in Rani Chennamma University, sir.
Oh,
It is in Belgaum, Karnataka.
which university?
Rani Chennamma University.
I see.
It is in Karnataka, sir.
Okay.
Hello,
Hello.
Pradip sir. This is Shujauddin from Central University of Gujarat. Actually, Ariba is
Glad,
trying to connect you, but it seems she's not audible to you. So you can please begin the lecture. Thank you, sir.
glad to meet you. Just see, I repeatedly told Ariba to start the presentation.
Okay, sir. I I'll tell her, sir. I'll tell her. Ariba, are you around? Can you listen to us? Ariba. Sir, I'll just contact her through mobile. I'll get back to you, sir.
Just tell her to start the
Yeah.
presentation.
Sure,
Slide
sir. Sure,
number
sir.
3. Slide number 3.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, sorry for the technical difficulty. I think she is facing some network issue.
Okay. Dr. Sajaddin, can you please tell
Yes, sir.
me if I have my PPT in my
Yes,
laptop,
sir. Yes, sir.
can I put it into display? Can I present it?
Yes, sir. If you can do it, sir. Or else I am trying to get it from her, and I'll display otherwise. It will be better if you can play it, sir.
How to play it? I don't know. This share. I will go to
Okay.
the
Okay.
share.
Yeah, yeah. Please go to share option. Yeah.
Okay, then video file, share screen. Which one? Share
Share screen.
screen.
Share screen. Yeah. Share screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then entire screen.
No, no. Only slide, or you can share the entire screen. Any option, sir.
Uh, but how can I go to the slide?
Sir, you can share the
Share,
entire
share,
screen, and
share.
you can change the slides. It will automatically change in the screen as well. I mean, in the StreamYard.
No, it cannot be displayed.
Sir, I'll try to do it. Let me get it from her
Yeah,
first.
no problem for me. I can wait. You
You can
just
share it, sir.
see.
Are you able to share it?
No, I am in my laptop. There is no compatibility,
Oh,
so it does not come into presentation. It cannot be shared.
okay, sir. Okay. Just let me get it from her, then we will begin, sir.
From mobile phone.
There is this option of sharing, sir.
From mobile phone.
Sir, is it visible?
Not yet.
Screen is visible to you.
Yeah.
My screen. Yeah. So
You are
can you see?
invisible. You are not visible.
Yeah. But the PPT is visible, right?
No. I can see only myself. Yes, yes, it is visible. Please
Yeah.
come to the
Now, please
next.
go ahead, sir.
Come to 3. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So, can I start?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Acha, do you want any time for introduction?
I'm sorry, sir. It was there. So you please kindly begin, sir. Sorry, I don't have your details. Otherwise, I would have introduced you to the audience. Please don't mind.
Okay, okay, okay. Today, I will talk on the ideological location of postmodernism. What I will try to do is that I will say briefly a few words about pre-modernity, and then I will come to the features of modern political thought, and then I will come to the ideological location. I will show that pre-modernity was marked by blind faith, as the modernist thinkers and historians have claimed. Modernity is marked by. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. And modernity is marked by reason, progress, freedom, science. There is so much optimism about the progressive journey of modernity. And there have been some criticisms of some
Sir,
aspects.
sorry to interfere, sir. Just a
Yes,
minute.
yes, yes.
Yeah. So let me take the privilege of introducing today's speaker. Good evening to one and all once again. It gives me immense pleasure that Professor Pradip Basu has agreed to speak on our forum, Association of Indian Research Scholars. We have been active since September 2020 and have successfully hosted eminent scholars including Noam Chomsky, Professor Joseph Nye, Professor Hargopal, Professor Rajan Harshe, Professor Zoya Hassan, Professor Afroz Alam, Professor Muhammad Muazzam Ali. Among others, we have also released 2 newsletters which included not just webinar reports, but also opinion piece by scholars from across India. If you have, so with this brief introduction, I open this gathering to you, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Association of Indian Research Scholars. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ariba. Thank you, other professors and research scholars with whom I just met. Thank you all for inviting me. Now, today I will speak on the ideological location of postmodernism. What I will do is that I will briefly show that pre-modernity was marked by blind faith, but then modernity came with the Renaissance and then Enlightenment, and modernity was marked by progress, reason, freedom, scientific and technological advancement. There were great promises made by modernity, but this modernity has also been criticized by different theoretical streams. And these, among these different theoretical and ideological streams, I will try to find out the location of postmodernism. First, we come to pre-modernity. In Europe, it was the Middle Ages. It was marked by feudalism. There were multiple centers of power: the church, the feudal lords, the king, the customs, social customs, etc. There was predominance of the community, and the individual was very much suppressed. Next, it was the age of faith, because everything was accepted as given and infallible. No rational questioning, rational inquiry were allowed. It was predominated by Christian theology, and there was predominance of religious scriptures and instructions from the church. Moreover, there was no such loyalty of the citizen to the modern nation state. There were personal allegiances to the immediate higher authority, the landlord or the vassal or the feudal lord or the king. And lastly, man seemed to be a puppet of destiny, and his status was ascribed by birth, not achieved by his individual efforts. So it is called by modernist historians, it is called a dark age. Dark age. Next, please come to the next slide. Here you see, in the 14th century, in the background of the rise of mercantile capitalism, Renaissance took place. It started in Italy, and it was the beginning of Western modernity. Then gradually, it started in 14th century. In 15th century, it spread to other parts of Europe. In 16th century, the Reformation movement of Martin Luther started, which was a challenge of the Protestant Christians against the authority of the Catholic Church and the Pope in the Vatican City. In the 17th century, there was scientific revolution, and in the 18th century, enlightenment and a significant intellectual movement took place. Industrial revolution had taken place from 1760 onwards, and in this background also, in 1789, the French Revolution took place, through which the bourgeoisie destroyed the ancient regime of the feudal lords and the king and established the power of the bourgeois state. And here, after industrial revolution, mercantile capitalism was transformed into industrial capitalism. So, the background of Renaissance was mercantile capitalism, while the background of Enlightenment was industrial capitalism. And this process, which started during the Renaissance, that I call the beginning of the journey of Western modernity. It reached its culmination during the Enlightenment in 18th century. And what were the features of the political thought of Western modernity? From Renaissance, certain features started in a half-hearted manner, but they became full-fledged through their culmination during the Enlightenment. Very briefly, I will look at these 10 features. First, humanism started during Renaissance and it culminated into anthropocentrism during Enlightenment. That means man was considered as the master, the lord of nature. Man was supposed to establish his mastery over plant kingdom and animals. Everything was centered around man. Secondly, scientific temperament started during Renaissance and it culminated in scientism in Enlightenment, during Enlightenment. Scientism means an obsession with science. Science became the only criteria by which authentic knowledge can be accepted. Third is, during Renaissance, questioning religion started in a half-hearted way, and it became a full-fledged secularism during the Enlightenment. That secularism means that in the public domain, in the affairs of the state, there is no room for any religion or spiritualism. Religion is a matter of the private domain, whereas the secular affairs, these worldly affairs, were the only area only a kind of activity allowed in the public domain. Fourth, during Renaissance, there was questioning blind faith. It started in a half-hearted way, though. And it blossomed into a full-fledged rationalism. Reason became the central regulatory principle of social life as well as intellectual thought. John Locke said, everything must prove its authenticity before the judgment seat of reason. 5. During the Renaissance, the collectivism of the medieval period began to be questioned, and during Enlightenment, it developed into its full-fledged form of individualism. Individual became the central entity. Hobbes also started it. Hobbes rejected idealist theory and accepted that individual is prior to the state. Although ultimately he believed in the supremacy of the absolute sovereign power of the state. Locke was influenced by Hobbes, but Locke took liberalism to its final stage. He gave primacy to individual right, individual interest, individual liberty. Sorry. Sixth, during the Renaissance, there was the beginning of technological development. We know the designs of Leonardo da Vinci and gradually during Enlightenment it became technocentrism. Technology became an obsession for Western modernity. Even a civilization was considered advanced or backward not on the basis of any human values, but on the basis of its technological progress. It is associated with scientism. We must remember that during Renaissance, Copernicus, Bruno, Galileo, they started scientific temperament. They began to establish it, and it became an obsession with science during Enlightenment, which I call scientism. And this is associated with technocentrism because science and technology are closely implicated. 7. During Renaissance, especially at the hands of Machiavelli, certain trends of nationalism began to appear. We know Italy was divided and subjected to foreign aggression. So Machiavelli, an Italian philosopher, he advised the ruler, the prince. Actually, the name of his small book is Prince. In this book, he advised the ruler to stand as a symbol of unity of whole Italy. A strong centralized government is required. And then gradually we know that Martin Luther during Protestant Reformation in 16th century encouraged national Protestant churches. Baudin in 16th century France encouraged the sovereign power of the state as a supreme power above the conflicts between the religious communities. Hobbes also advocated in favor of a strong external sovereign power, the state. And Rousseau, Voltaire, Diderot all contributed, and especially Hegel. He glorified the state, the German or the Prussian state, the nation state, as the march of God on earth. He glorified it from the moral as the highest moral entity. He glorified it from a metaphysical idealist point of view. Nationalism, so during the Enlightenment, it became a nation state centric ideology. Nation state became predominant over all other communities, all other groups of society, all individuals, all associations of society. 8. During the Renaissance, there was a new sense of historical development which was taking birth, a sense of historical journey, historical movement, and this finally culminated during the Enlightenment into historicism, especially at the hands of Condorcet, at the hands of Voltaire, at the hands of especially Hegel, that world history is moving towards progress. This became very important during Enlightenment and Western modernity. 9. Concern for practical politics could be found during the Renaissance, especially in the thought of Machiavelli, and it gradually became prominent. We know Francis Bacon, we know Hobbes, then Descartes. We know they saw man as a machine. They wanted to see everything in a scientific approach. And then we have Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, who developed the empiricism during the Enlightenment. Also, we have positivism of Auguste Comte, which theories gave emphasis on our knowledge acquired through our experience, through our sense organs, experience of facts, and this knowledge is considered as authentic knowledge. Then we come to the 10th point, that during Renaissance there was a there was a kind of rejection of idealist theory. Machiavelli was talking about practical political statecraft. So idealist theory was rejected. Idealist theory of Plato, Aristotle. We know later Hegel also resorted to idealist theory. But during Renaissance, it began to be rejected, and we find there is the development of modern democratic thought, modern democratic theory and concepts, concepts of universal adult suffrage, parliamentary democracy, independence of judiciary, freedom of speech, etc. This developed during the culmination of Western modernity in Enlightenment. So we can see that when pre-modernity was a dark age, blind faith, age of blind faith, modernity was marked by glorification of man, science, liberation from the clutch of religion, that is secularism, reason, freedom of individual, development of technology, nationalism, nation state, world historical progress, concern for practical politics, empiricism and positivism, and modern democratic thought. So modernity became even till today, modernity is the most predominant discourse, Western modernity. All criticisms are coming from the margin. They are relegated to the margin, and the center place of Western thought, modern philosophy, modern political science, political philosophy, social philosophy, literary thought, sociological thought, in everything, modernity, modern thought has occupied the central place. Now we come to the next slide, please. In spite of this predominance of modernity, there are certain criticisms. Modernity is, Western modernity is marked by C at the center, positivism, that is glorification of science, fact, actual knowledge, experience, empiricism. Then liberalism, glorification of the individual, humanism, glorification of man, and rationalism, glorification of reason. This Western modernity developed at the hands of so many philosophers, Descartes, Hobbes, first Hobbes, then Descartes. Before Descartes, we can mention Machiavelli, then Martin Luther, then Baudin, Grotius, Hobbes, Descartes, Locke, David Hume, Voltaire, Diderot. There is a spelling mistake in Diderot. There will be a T at the end. Diderot. And also in 19th century, before 19th century, uh, Kant, then Hegel. And in the 19th century, we had so many thinkers like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Herbert Spencer, James Mill, his son John Stuart Mill. This is Western modernity. It occupies the center place. It gives so many tall promises of progress, freedom, reason. Actually, modernity has been glorified in academia, in our knowledge, in our daily life. Modernity has certain grand narratives, major philosophical thought like Hegelian dialectics, Marxian historical materialism, Adam Smith's political economy, etc. Modern epistemology talks about certainty of knowledge, authenticity of knowledge, scientific, it gives emphasis on scientific knowledge. And I already said there is rationalization or rationalism, rationalization of social life on the basis of rationalism. And there is the importance of the subject, I, cogito, thinking I, acting I, knowing I, the I who knows, who acts, that is cogito, which was, this concept came from Descartes. And also humanism, historicism, and modernity talk is an advocate of homogenization, normalization, unity, glorification of the self, secularism, nationalism, technocentrism, and there is a glorification of individual totality and essence. Essence is, everything is defined by essence. And language is considered as having as being a transparent medium. The reality is represented through language, and the meaning of the text is authentic, stable, certain, if we can know the intention of the author. Now, the point is that this modernity began to be critiqued. Critique means not total rejection. Some parts are preserved, accepted, appreciated. First, we can mention existentialism, but before that, I must tell you that these criticisms all are directed at modernity, but there is a lot of difference among them. One criticizes, say, 2 or 3 points, another criticizes last 5 points, another criticizes the first point. So these critiques are not homogeneous. There is a lot of diversity and heterogeneity. Just remember this, please. Now, one, existentialism at different times, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Sartre, they contributed to the development of existentialism. Existentialism challenged modernity's optimism. That the history is moving towards hope, progress, hope of progress. This optimistic faith has been challenged by existentialism. Just think of the film Devdas. The heroine, Aishwarya Rai, Paro, she is running, and overcoming all obstacles. She arrives at the main gate, but the gate is closed. She cannot meet Devdas. This is an existential position. Life is full of frustration, failure. Existentialism challenges the optimism of modernity. And also, existentialism says that existence precedes essence. Modernity believed that man has a rational essence, but existentialism, very briefly, I am talking here, very briefly. So, I am making some oversimplifications also. Existentialism said that man does not have any such given essence, rational essence. Our existence makes us what we are, what will be, what will be. It is a process of becoming. I am responsible for what I will be. Next we come to modernism. Modernism developed in 1920s at the hands of Virginia Woolf, Mallarmé, poet Paul Valéry, Baudelaire, T.S. Eliot, Kafka, etc. It was inspired by existentialism to some extent. It also, although its name is modernism, so some people make a confusion, but modernism is not a justification of modernity, rather, it is a critique, a partial critique of modernity. They showed that life is scattered, inconsistent, incoherent. There is no such coherent, meaningful life which modernity envisaged. Next, the third one is early American postmodernism. Robert Venturi, Susan Sontag, Charles Jenks, Yahab Hassan. This was inspired by existentialism in 1950s. Modernism was mainly a cultural movement. Painting, plays, novels, poems, literature, cultural movement. And similarly, early American postmodernism, number 3, in 1950s, it was also a cultural movement, but it was not very strong. It was inspired by existentialism, and it also partly made criticism of Western modernity. The hope, the optimism, the rationalism, the belief that man is a rational being, these were questioned by early American postmodernism. 4. Structuralism, contributed by Foucault, Lyotard, Deleuze, Guattari, Lacan. Poststructuralism developed in France after 1968. Okay, before poststructuralism, I should discuss for structuralism. I missed it. Structuralism was contributed by Saussure, Ferdinand Saussure, Sigmund Freud, Levi-Strauss, Althusser. Saussure was a linguist, structuralist. Freud was a structuralist in psychiatry. Levi-Strauss in anthropology, Althusser, a structuralist Marxist. Structuralism criticized the concept of cogito of modernity. Descartes said that cogito ergo sum, that means I think, therefore I am. That means before any epistemology can be acquired, any knowledge can be acquired, we must presume that there is a self, a subject. If I don't exist, who acquires knowledge? This subject, cogito, above history, above historical conditions. It is a self-conscious, transparent, autonomous self, subject, I, human subject, cogito. Cogito is the, someone said, cogito is the ontological source of all epistemological certainties. Ontology means theory of being, existence. And epistemology means theory of knowledge. So knowledge is possible if you assume that the cogito exists. So cogito is the ontological source of all epistemological certainties. But structuralism challenged this view. They said that there is no such, they problematized the concept autonomous cogito, concept of autonomous cogito, and they said that there are many structures behind which ultimately determine the cogito. The gender, caste, class. In Indian context, we can mention caste, class, race, gender. These structures are there, and that is why cogito is not autonomous. Cogito is conditioned by the structure. If I am a male, my cogito is different. If you are a female, your cogito is different from my cogito. Next comes 5, Poststructuralism, enriched by Foucault, Lyotard, Deleuze, Guattari, Lacan. French poststructuralism started after 1968. French poststructuralism said that not only cogito but also structure, both are fluid, unstable, full of ruptures. So poststructuralism made a critique of modernity and also structuralism. Poststructuralism says that the concept of the world history, unilinear progress of world history, that is wrong. There are many histories, there are ruptures, discontinuities. So we are not always moving towards progress. Next is 6, deconstruction. Deconstruction is coming from poststructuralism. That is why this small arrow. Deconstruction also criticized Western modernity. Western modernity thought in terms of binaries. Day and night, male and female, Hindu and Muslim, good and bad, black and white. And one is placed in a superior position, there is a hierarchy. Deconstruction says that in a text, the meaning is uncertain. Author's intention is not important. Every reader is an author. The meaning of the text is uncertain, changing, depending on the context, full of contradictions. And in any text, there is a hierarchy of the words. If you invert them, invert their position, if the central words are pushed to the margin and the marginalized words are taken back to the taken at on the center, then the meaning of the text will change. And also, thirdly, the binaries are, their boundaries are untenable, problematic. There is a lot of overlapping. Modernity does not understand that. Male and female, every male has some female characteristics and every female has some male characteristics. That is why those who are influenced by deconstruction, they give emphasis on the hijra identity, the eunuchs, or the LGBTQIA+, transgenders, third genders. Hindu and Muslim, this binary will be also dismantled by deconstructionists. Hindu and Muslim, self and other, they are mutually constitutive. Modernity pushes away, further away, the other from the self. But that is wrong. Next comes 7, post-structuralist feminism of Helen Sixu, Luz Irigaray, Judith Butler. They are inspired by deconstruction and post-structuralism, and they say that this male-female division, I just already said, this is unstable, the boundary line between male and female. Not only that, the female identity is a fluid identity full of ruptures. It is a fluid identity full of ruptures, discontinuities, inconsistencies. So you cannot think of a consistent, coherent female entity. Next is 8, Western Marxism. Western Marxism of Gramsci, humanist Marxist, Althusser, structuralist Marxist, Lukács, humanist Marxist, Karl Korsch, humanist Marxist. These Western Marxists, they rejected positivism of modernity. The positivist tendency within Marxism which we find in Plekhanov, Bukharin, Stalin, especially Kautsky. This has been criticized. They rejected Western Marxism, rejected positivism, scientism. They rejected technocentrism. They said that human consciousness, human role, human intervention is extremely important. Human consciousness must be upheld. So economic determinism, historical determinism, positivism, all these tendencies must be rejected. Next we come to a similar theory, critical theory of Frankfurt School, enriched by Horkheimer, Adorno, Herbert Marcuse or Marcuse, Habermas. Habermas is still alive, Jürgen Habermas. Frankfurt School was established in 1923. Then because of the rise of Hitler's Nazism in early 1930s, They left and they settled in USA. And after the collapse of Nazism, they came back to Germany. Frankfurt School's critical theory, they also rejected economic determinism and historical determinism of Plekhanov, Bukharin, Stalin, and Kautsky. In their long journey, Frankfurt School gives emphasis on culture. Frankfurt School said that Western modernity gives emphasis on instrumental rationality and cultured industry and positivistic science, positivistic Marxism, scientism. This should be rejected. There are actually two types of reason. One is instrumental reason. That means what we find in utilitarianism of Bentham, that man uses reason as an instrument, as a means for serving some other purpose. But the second one, the first one, utilitarian, it gives emphasis on consequentialism, the outcome instrument. Reason is used as an instrument and it is evaluated on the basis of outcome, consequence, utility, greatest good of the greatest number. That was the principle advocated by Bentham. On the other hand, Kant, although he was an advocate of modernity, Western modernity, he said that man has intrinsic rationality, not instrumental. So when one thing is considered to be morally right by categorical imperative, it is a moral duty and man must do it, being a rational being, not because of any good consequence or calculation of benefit. Man may suffer for that, but man must do that. That is intrinsic reason. And Frankfurt School glorified the intrinsic reason, not instrumental reason. Next is neo and post-Marxism. Neo-Marxism and post-Marxism. There are many actually. Frederick Jameson is called neo-Marxist. Richard Wolff and Stephen Kallenberg, they are known as postmodern Marxist. And Laclau and Mouffe, they are known as post-Marxist. They also criticize essentialism of modernity. Essentialism or any positivistic understanding of society is totally rejected by them. They also give emphasis on consciousness of man, human intervention, human culture. They make a critique of technocentrism. Actually, Frankfurt School, it criticized technocentrism and obsession with instrumental reason. Next, we come to post-colonial theory, which was inspired by partly by Marxism, partly by postmodernism. It was enriched by Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Bill Ashcroft, Partho Chatterjee, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Ashish Nandi, Ajit Chaudhuri, etc. Also, Kollan Sannal, Anjan Chakraborty, Anup Dhar. Now, also Leela Gandhi, Gauri, I forgot the name. Now, post-colonial theory says that postmodernism criticized Western modernity, but Western modernity came to the colonies along with colonialism, and it is known as colonial modernity, and colonial modernity was implicated with colonialism, so it was repressive. Although colonial modernity has often been depicted as having a dual character. On the one hand, it liberates from the clutches of the traditional society, just for example, Indian society, the caste system, think of it. But on the other hand, colonial modernity, it subjugates our thought, our consciousness, our culture, our epistemology, even today, even after the colonies have achieved political independence. So post-colonial theory makes a thorough critique of colonial modernity, inspired by postmodern critique of Western modernity. And there is a small arrow. From postcolonialism comes subaltern studies, a branch. Subaltern studies is a branch of history. It is many people contributed to its development, like Ranojit Guha, Partho Chatterjee, the same Partho Chatterjee, Dipesh Chakraborty, David Hardiman, David Arnold. Actually, uh, Gayatri Spivak also contributed to it. Subaltern Studies School, they make a serious critique of colonial modernity as well as Western modernity, because colonial modernity is derived from Western modernity. They were inspired by Gramsci, and they thought that Enlightenment, modernity, Enlightenment reason, these suppressed the subaltern consciousness. Actually, elitism dominated so much in the historiography of India or South Asia or some other post-colonial societies. Enlightenment reason dominated so much that elite domination could be perceived so much that subaltern consciousness, subaltern aspirations, subaltern understanding of life, subaltern perceptions of freedom struggle, all these have been ignored, neglected, and marginalized. So they glorified some alternative parallel streams of reason. Lastly, I come to postmodernism. Postmodernism, I would say that when oh, postmodernism is the most thorough, comprehensive critique of Western modernity. Today's postmodernism, enriched by Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Lyotard, Baudrillard, and others, also Lacan. Today's postmodernism makes a thorough critique of Western modernity. When all other critics pick up certain parts and spare some other parts of Western modernity, postmodernism makes a thoroughgoing critique of Western modernity. One thing I must mention that in 1950s there was early American postmodernism. Then in 1968, in French poststructuralism developed. There was Lyotard in French poststructuralism. In 1979, Lyotard wrote a book. English translation came out in 1983. The name of the book is The Postmodern Condition. So, what is the significance of this? A post-structuralist French thinker accepted the concept of postmodernism. Actually, for this reason, many scholars thought that postmodernism and post-structuralism can be used, the two terms can be used as equivalents. But technically it is not correct. Strictly speaking, there is some difference between postmodernism and post-structuralism, but overall, both of them make a critique of Western modernity. Postmodernism says that modernity is, Lyotard said, that postmodernism can be defined as incredulity to meta-narratives. Meta-narrative means a big narrative, a grand narrative, a big story. Suppose Marx's historical materialism or Hegel's dialectics. Postmodernism, Lyotard said that postmodernism will reject the meta-narratives of Western modernity. Incredulity to meta-narratives, that is a feature of postmodernism. And the modernist epistemology, the search, quest for certainty of knowledge, authenticity of knowledge, that is problematized by postmodernism. Thirdly, the obsession with science is interrogated by postmodernism. Obsession with science, scientism of Western modernity. Fourthly, societal rationalization has been done at a high price. Stephen White wrote this, that the centrality of reason and societal rationalization in all spheres of modern society, this has cost too much. Fifth, postmodernism accepts the problematization of cogito. Foucault said that even the individual is constituted by discourse and power. So how can the subject, human subject or cogito, be an autonomous, coherent whole? True, Kant once said in his famous essay 1784, What is Enlightenment? That what is enlightenment? The basic spirit of enlightenment is that individual comes out of dependence on others. Individual becomes free from self-incurred immaturity. So free man, free thinking man, daring to think, daring to take up responsibility for what he thinks, for what he does, for what he knows. That is the mark of enlightenment. But Foucault will say that this cogito of modernity It is a highly problematic concept. 6. Humanism. Postmodernism rejects this anthropocentrism. Anthropos means man, because we have no right to destroy animal life, plant life. We have no right to destroy ecology and environment in order to satisfy the limitless hunger and thirst and desire of man. We must not do that. That comes from modernity. We must not do that. Bacon once said, knowledge is power, and with this power, man will subjugate, dominate over nature. But this arrogance of modernity must be rejected. Long back, long before postmodernism, our poet Rabindranath Thakur, he said that আকাশ ভরা সূর্য তারা বিশ্ব ভরা প্রাণ তাহারি মাঝখানে আমি পেয়েছি মোর স্থান. মানে the sky is, it means sky is full of the sun and the stars. The whole world is full of lives, of variety of lives. And here, me, as a humble human being, has got my place. This humble attitude of Rabindranath Thakur, long back he said this. He wrote this song. Now we find the echo in postmodernism. Next is that historicism. Foucault says that this Western modernity thinks that there is a world historical journey towards progress and freedom. Especially Kant and Hegel believed in that, and also Marx. But yes, see here, also Marx. Please come to slide 6. It will be convenient for me. Here you see point number 7, this world historical journey, this concept of Kant, Hegel, and the Enlightenment thinker. This concept has been rejected by postmodern thinkers. Foucault said that history has ruptures and there is no universal standard to judge whether history is moving towards progress or going backward towards retrogressive destination. You cannot judge it. Even Marxism cannot say that if productivity is higher, then the civilization is higher. You cannot say that. If you have seen the film Agontuk of Satyajit Ray, in this film, it is saying that even the African primitive communities are more advanced than the Western modernity, because Western modernity created Hiroshima, Nagasaki, First World War, Second World War, conducted genocide of Jews under Hitler, and genocide in Australia, killing of Red Indians in America. So the Santhal tribes, the tribal people, maybe they are illiterate, but their civilization is much higher. That was the point of Satyajit Ray in Agontuk film. And then you see, also Foucault says that history is full of ruptures. There are micro histories. History of Tamil Nadu, history of Andhra Pradesh, or history of Bengal, Bangla, or history of Punjab. Different histories are there. Within each, there are more micro level histories are there. Do not try to combine them into a master grand narrative of history. Then you see, postmodernism glorifies heterogeneity and pluralism, not homogeneity, not normalization, not normal standard to be imposed. Variety, diversity is celebrated. Next, responsibility to the other. Postmodernism gives emphasis on dependence, mutual dependence of self and other, Hindu and Muslim, male and female, day and night, black and white, west and east. other should not be separated out. What is the agenda of modernity? Next, critique of secularism. Postmodernism does not accept that private domain and public domain can be divided absolutely. And spiritualism is a matter of private domain. No, it is quite possible that spiritualism is also mixed up in our public life, public domain. Nationalism. Postmodernism makes a thorough critique of nationalism because there are many other communities and associations in society. So why only the oppressive nation state will enjoy supremacy? Long back, when Rabindranath Tagore was awarded Nobel Prize in 1913, he was invited to USA and Japan and he gave lectures. And there he's just during the First World War, he strongly condemned the concept of Western nation state, which is aggressive and greedy and militarist. And before his death, 1941, Second World War had already started. In his famous essay, Crisis in Civilization, Rabindranath Tagore again talked about the condemned, discarded, repudiated the violent nation state of the West. Critique of technocentrism. 12. Postmodernism, I already discussed it, that this technology-centric life undermining human values. Human life is undervalued. Technology becomes everything. Gadgets, tools, electrical and electronic appliances, everything. 13. Celebration of tolerance. Modernity does not teach us to be tolerant. Learn from the lessons of Red Indians or Hiroshima, Nagasaki, First World War, Second World War, Hitler, Mussolini. But postmodernism glorifies tolerance. 14. Liberalism and individualism. This individual is most important in modern liberal philosophy, but postmodernism will say that the individual is very much derived from the community. So it has a responsibility to the community, and there is no one universal model of the individual. And then totality. Modernity considers totality very important in Britain or in USA or in France or as a whole world. But postmodernism is the philosophy of micro level entities. Totality is an epistemological violence. It destroys tolerance. 16. Anti-essentialism. Modernity defines everything as essence, by essence. Human body has a rational essence. But postmodernism will say, no, there is no such pre-given essence. Actually, think of 9/11. Twin towers were destroyed. A passenger plane that was used as a missile. What is the essence of that plane? Is it a passenger plane or is it a missile? So, essentialism is to be rejected, Identity politics, think of it. I may be a male, I may be a non-Brahmin, Kasto, I may be a Bengali, I may be an Indian, I may be a middle-class person, I may be a professor, I may be a father, I may be a husband, I may be a son, I may be a brother, I may be Hindu, I may be Muslim. There are so many identities are there. So why are we looking for one permanent, unchangeable essence? That is the argument of postmodernism against Western modernity. 17. Discourse and Foucault's concept of power. It's a long topic and I don't have much time now. So very briefly I will say, Foucault said that natural is problematic. If you say that homosexuality is abnormal, unnatural, heterosexuality is normal, but Foucault will say that power and discourse, dominant discourse means some meaningful utterance or a serious statement associated, implicated with power and institution. Power and discourse teach us what is normal and what is abnormal. Nothing is natural. In ancient Greek society, in his book History of Sexuality, Foucault wrote that in ancient Greek society, homosexuality was not considered as something like a disease. So, Foucault says, what I think not because of any natural process of arguments, but because of my thought is coerced, my thought is regulated, constituted, constructed by power and discourse and language and institutions. 18 meaning and language, postmodernism, that is, Derrida will say, I already said that there is no fixed meaning. So all kinds of fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Buddhist, whatever, fundamentalism depends on the sanctity, purity of the religious text. But Derrida will say that language is not transparent. Language constructs the reality. Language tells me this is a cat, and I come to know that this is a cat. Language has an active role in constructing meaning, and meaning is uncertain. There is no authentic meaning given in any religious text. Meaning depends on the reader. Reader is an author. And deconstruction, I already said that binaries are dismantled. That is why transgender is so important. You know, when the British modernity came to India, this colonial modernity, they conducted census. They went to some people said, I am Hindu, but I go to mosque. Some people said, I am a Muslim, but I go to this temple. Who is he? Who is she? A Hindu or a Muslim? That was the identity, pre-modern, multi-dimensional identity, which is destroyed by Western modernity. They understand binary. Either you are a Hindu or you are a Muslim. Take the example of my wife. She is a very dedicated Hindu lady. She worships Goddess Durga, Lakshmi, Kali, all. Lakshmi is called in Bangla Lokhi. Lokhi, Saraswati, Durga, Kali, Shiv, etc. She goes to all temples. But you will be surprised to know that she also goes to mosques, mazhars. She also goes to Christian church. She thinks there is no such difference in my mind. God is one. You know, Ramakrishna Paramahansadev, he said, Jato mat tato pad. There are so many roads to reach God. Every road is good, virtuous. And he, through Kalma and with a Maulvi, he became a Muslim, being a Hindu saint. He did not find any difference. This binary was dismantled by him without knowing deconstruction of Derrida. Vivekananda said that India's brain is Hindus and India's body is Muslims, and both should be blended together. So deconstruction dismantles binaries. 20 privileging new social movements. I have little time. I will just for 5 minutes more. Please give me 5 minutes. Uh, See, at first there were peasant uprisings in the feudal period. Then in the modern period, Western modernity, we have seen political movements demanding political rights, freedom of speech, universal adult suffrage, right to vote, right to be voted, right to do governmental job, etc. Democratic movements. Then came Marxism, socialist movements gave emphasis on class struggle, economic demands, abolition of private ownership over the means of production, end of class exploitation, etc. But now we witness new social movements, which is in harmony with postmodernism. Postmodernism privileges new social movements like issues of human rights, sex workers, child rights, homosexuals and lesbians, LGBTQIA+, gender discrimination, racism, Dalit resistance, apartheid, anti-apartheid movement, ecology, environment, all these new issues, new social movements are privileged by postmodernism. And lastly, 21st point, I will say that we have been talking about the theory, political theory of postmodernism, the ideological location of postmodernism. That is what I discuss. At last, I will mention that two thinkers at least talked about postmodern social situation, social formation, not political theory. Frederick Jameson wrote postmodernism as the logic of late capitalism. And David Harvey wrote Condition of Postmodernity. Postmodern condition in Canada, USA, we find this. There is no industrial manufacturing, no production like Western modernity. There is service sector, share market, huge profit, but without any production. Huge profit without the production of a single commodity. All is virtual. And this virtual reality pointed out by Baudrillard, simulacrum. The virtual reality becomes so much important that the real world becomes neglected. That park in USA, Disney park and what park, there are imitations of great things. Or Madame Tussauds Museum in France. There are imitations, and imitations have become so much important. And virtual reality, simulacrum, Baudrillard called it simulacrum, simulation actually, imitation. And then think of it that virtual reality has become so much important. In the hostel, a student does not know his neighboring or her neighboring student because the student is busy chatting with virtual friends. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, always chatting with virtual friends. The real human beings live next door and they do not know each other. That is the glorification of virtual reality. There is share market, there is service sector, there is simulacrum. This is called the postmodernity or postmodern condition. Thank you very much. I have finished. If there is any question, please bring it on the chat box.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor Pradip Basu. It was really a marathon and a thought-provoking lecture in a simplified manner. So,
Thank
with your kind permission, shall we take on some questions, sir, which has been put
Yes,
on the
yes,
chat box? And then
yes.
there are a number of questions, but on priority basis, I would like to pose them. So, the first question is from AIRS, that there has not been a proper approach to postmodernism in Indian English literature so far. How can we bring together postmodernism and Indian literature and see the various ways of reading this literature?
How can we bring together postmodernism and Indian literature and see the various ways of reading this literature?
Yes, sir.
Very, very interesting question. Just 1 second, I'm taking some water.
Yeah, please, please. That's why I said that it has been a marathon lecture.
Now you see, I know very little about Indian literature. I know Bangla, Bengali, English, and to some extent Hindi. But I have deep respect for other languages. Tamil language is very rich, I know. Urdu language is very sweet and rich. All other languages we do not know. They are they have their own treasure house. Postmodernism will say that we have to cultivate our own literature, which can develop a critique of Western modernity, especially colonial modernity, which crippled our own thought, distorted our knowledge, which truncated our own indigenous perception. So, Indian literature must be a refuge, a shelter through which we can invoke our own self, our Indian self, our Tamil self, our Malayali self, our Punjabi self, our Gujarati self, our Bengali self. If you talk about Indian English literature, you have to read a few books. These are there. Indian English literature, Bharati, uh, Salman Rushdie, Amitabh Ghosh, Upamanyu Chatterjee. Uh, there are many people who have written, Bharati Mukherjee, who have written, Dhruv Lahiri. They have tried to apply post-colonial theoretical awareness. Actually, post-colonialism, that is a different topic. I did not discuss it today. That is a long independent topic. Post-colonialism started with the Commonwealth literature and then post-colonial literature conference and the journals, and then writings of Homi Bhabha, before that Edward Said, then Amitabh Ghosh, Escobar, Partho Chatterjee. So many people are there. So I would say that postmodernism can be brought together with Indian literature. Can be, provided that we are we write it, create it, or read it with an awareness of the critique of enlightenment, critique of Western modernity. That's all.
Fine, sir. Shall I take a few more questions, sir?
Yes, yes, sure. Sure, sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The next question is from Danish Haider. And the question is, how do ideologies of postmodernism affect location and to what magnitude? Or how postmodern ideologies affect metaphysics of nature?
This must be a question of philosophy. It's a difficult question. I come from the background of political science. I teach political thought and political philosophy, but I will try. How do ideologies of postmodernism affect location and to what magnitude? Actually, this location, this ideological location of postmodernism, today what I discussed, this shows that there are different principles of postmodernism which constitute its ideology. I listed 21, but you can break into more, or you can uh, condense them into lesser number. I thought that these 21 features will demonstrate the ideological location. That is, the location is the longest distance from modernity which is placed at the center. Longest, that is the magnitude. This ideology, which I demonstrated through 21 features, this ideology shows that it can be located at the longest distance from modernity, Western modernity, as compared to other critics of Western modernity. Because ideology of postmodernism provides us with a most comprehensive and thorough critique. These critics certainly tell us not to totally reject Western modernity. We must remember that. Critique means you find out the internal inconsistencies of the position of Western modernity, of the discourse of Western modernity. And out of that, you invoke, you articulate, you bring out the criticism of the problematic positions. How postmodern ideologies affect metaphysics of nature? It is a very good question. Very good question. Danis Haidar, I don't know who are you. It would be better if you could write that. Uh, Perhaps you belong to philosophy. I'm not sure. It is a very good question. How postmodern ideologies affect metaphysics of nature? Modernity believes in nature. Materialism says that nature exists independently of our consciousness. Naturalism also says that everything is derived from nature. Nature. This is the metaphysics of nature. Metaphysics means beyond physics, beyond physical reality. That means the ultimate truth, ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is metaphysics, theory of ultimate reality. So, nature is the ultimate reality. That is the belief of modernity. But postmodern ideologies will say that when you say nature, you are saying it. Your thinking is not natural, cannot be. Your thinking is already influenced by power and discourse. Your concept of nature that comes from a definite language, discourse, dominant institutions, and power. What I understand by the term nature, you may not understand the same thing. A person in Africa, a person in Andaman Islands, a person in New York, and a person in Kolkata like me. Our understanding of nature that cannot be the same. So, postmodern ideologies point out that this metaphysics of nature is highly problematic. There is nothing called nature or called natural. It is my discourse, my vision, my eyesight, my nigahe, my vision, which makes me understand what is nature. जो मेरे महसूस होता वो उसके लिए जिम्मेदार है. Sorry for my wrong, incorrect Urdu and Hindi. I am
No,
trying.
sir.
उसके लिए जिम्मेदार है my निगाहें, मेरे निगाहें. So, metaphysics of nature can be problematized. If you say homosexuality is unnatural, heterosexuality is natural, postmodernism will say that your understanding is a product, is a result of the dominant discourse. Power taught you what is truth, what is natural, what is normal. So, if you can come out of this power of Western modernity, the binaries, then you will say even homosexuality, heterosexuality, lesbian, or transgender, all these are categories. They cannot be considered, they cannot be punished, they cannot be banished as unnatural, as going against the metaphysics of nature. That's all. Next question.
Yes, sir. The next question is from Nandagopal K. And the question is, are there any contradictions in mixing Dalit identity politics with postmodernism? If yes, where can we place Deleuze in this?
That is also politically very important question. Are there any contradictions in mixing Dalit identity of politics with postmodernism? No, I don't think. I don't think so. Because postmodernism will dismantle this binary between the Brahmin and the Dalit. Brahmin must realize that the self of the Brahmin is constituted by the other Dalit. Other means within single quotes, other, who is the Dalit. Modernity will teach me that in this binary between the self and the other, the more you pushes the other away from you, the more your self-identity becomes consolidated. Take the example of Hitler. The more you push away, farther away the Jew identity from your Christian German identity. Your Christian German identity becomes stable, safe, secure, and pure. Consolidate yourself as a pure race, Aryan race. So you kill them, you put them into the gas chamber, concentration camp. Similarly, this binary will tell the Brahmin, you move further away, push further away the Dalit, who is your other, from yourself. Just like Hindu and Muslim, some will say that push the Muslim is your other, push the Muslim further away from your self identity. Only then your Hindu identity will be safe, secure. But postmodernism, deconstruction of Derrida, will say that this is an artificial, false realization. The truth is that the self and the other are mutually constitutive. Hindu life and Muslim life are mutually dependent on each other. Just the name Hindu that comes from the Parsi people who thought that those people who live beyond the river Sindh, they are called Hindus. Actually, Hindu and Muslim. Similarly, Brahmin and Dalit. Brahmin, if the Brahmin can beg forgiveness for the oppression over the Dalit, if the Brahmin repents for whatever oppression they have done upon the Dalit, if the Brahmin, along with the Dalit, together, jointly, they demand abolition of caste system, abolition of Dalit system, abolition of upper caste, lower caste system, because both are dependent. The self is dependent on the other. So this binary should be demolished, should be abolished. If they can do it, only then there will be justice. And regarding Deluge, I honestly I know very little about what Deluge will say about this Dalit question, so I will not make any comment over this. Please come to the next point, next question.
Yes, I hope this is the last question, which is being posed by Sajauddin Shuja Chapaban. Yeah. Isn't secularism and secular public sphere in the Western modernity was an extended form of a personal sphere, which became quite true with the ban on hijab in European countries.
Sajauddin,
Yeah, and
Nijamuddin.
more, and more countries are becoming very intolerant
Okay.
towards these practices.
Is not secularism and secular public sphere in the Western modernity was an extended form of a personal sphere which became quite true with the ban on hijab in European countries. I can say my position, Western modernity divided public sphere and personal sphere. Again, it is a question of binary. Secular is the public sphere, and religion, spiritualism comes in the personal sphere. But the point is that, on the one hand, postmodernism glorifies pluralism, tolerance, respect to the other. It is true that there are two kinds of pluralism. Kellner and Guest, they said there are two types of pluralism. One is ludic and the other is oppositional. Ludic postmodernism, there are two kinds of postmodernism. Ludic postmodernism is very light, takes everything lightly, non-political. Some people they have given the cited the example of Baudrillard, but oppositional postmodernism accepts a social responsibility, social commitment. Oppositional postmodernism of Foucault, Derrida, Lacan. This oppositional postmodernism will say that pluralism must be allowed. So hijab should be, whether a lady will put on hijab or not, that is absolutely her own choice. The French government cannot impose anything on her. Similarly, the Muslim fundamentalists cannot impose anything on her. So the individual lady, it is her choice. If she thinks that I am happy with my own culture, Islamic culture, my hijab, it is a sign of my identity. I think that she should be allowed. But if she thinks that no, I give up this dress and I take up some Western dress, that is also her own choice. A Muslim fundamentalist cannot stop her doing that. So, Hindu fundamentalist or Christian fundamentalist or Muslim fundamentalist, no fundamentalist should encroach upon the freedom of choice of the individual. So, in France, hijab has been banned. That is a kind of homogenization. Postmodernism will reject it, will oppose it. Postmodernism will support pluralism, autonomy, respect to the other. Next question, Prashant Kaushik. Postmodernism criticizes the idea of looking world in binaries. classification of X and Y. True. Will it also not criticize attempts to project universalization and see everything as one and the same? Exactly. Exactly. That is what I wanted to show the ideological location of modernism, that it will criticize binaries and therefore to project universalization, attempts to project universalization and see everything as one and the same. This will go against the spirit of postmodernism. Postmodernism does not accept the concept of totality, so does not accept the concept of universal. It will appreciate particulars, it will appreciate differences. It is a philosophy of differences, of pluralism. So, any attempt to universalize, maybe that a Hindu attempt, a Muslim attempt, or an Enlightenment project of universalization, or the project of colonialism, which was criticized by Edward Said, which was criticized by Franz Fanon or Fanon. All these attempts to universalization must be opposed by postmodernism. Dipesh Chakraborty, a famous historian, has written a book, Provincializing Europe. Europe, West Europe, Enlightenment, tried to universalize its reason and its historiography. But Dipesh Chakraborty has been influenced by postmodernism and he is a post-colonial thinker. He said that Europe, Europe cannot claim universal validity. It is a product of Eurocentric bias. What came? The reason and historiography, which were the product of West Europe of 18th century, Enlightenment period. Those concepts were imposed as universally valid, having universal truth claim. They were imposed upon the rest of the world. So Dipesh Chakraborty challenged and this universalizing attempt and said we should go for provincializing Europe. Europe is also a local, a provincial entity, not universal. So postmodernism will certainly discard this attempt. Paramaguru Raj, sir, what is after postmodernism? That is a very controversial issue. Postmodernism, Foucault was asked, you are criticizing modernity, enlightenment. Then what is your suggestion for the alternative? Foucault said that that is a problem of postmodernism. Postmodernism can make a critique of modernity, but cannot suggest what will be a better society, what will be the name, what will be the form of that, what will be the definition of a better society. He said, I really do not know. I know only one thing, that these are the loopholes. These are the problems of the hidden power of modernity, of the implicit underlying power of enlightenment. I am exposing this power, but I do not know, I cannot say what will be a better society. Because postmodernism believes post-structuralism. Foucault refused to be called a postmodern thinker. Anyway, post-structuralism says that postmodernism says that a critique is very important, and let the people decide on the basis of that critique what alternative they can choose after postmodernism. Muskan
Yes, sir.
Solanki.
Sir, questions will keep on popping up.
Is it from?
So I shall request. Yes, sir. It is from YouTube.
Okay, you tell me
Sir,
what to do.
yeah, I hope it's better that you please personally contact sir via phone or by email. I think it's time for the last session. That is
Shall
vote
I
of thanks.
shall I type my WhatsApp number here in the chat
Yes, please.
box?
Yes, please. Yes, please. So the way
I
how
cannot.
patient and authoritatively. So nevertheless, the organizers will share.
See,
Not to worry.
9836154165. Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
This is my WhatsApp number. Acha, how postmodernism is reflected in literature. Also explain postmodernist views on human nature. Very briefly, I will answer Muskan Solanki. Postmodernism is reflected in literature. I already answered a question regarding literature. Uh, some literature, I already told you that Rabindranath Tagore, known as Tagore, he gave a lecture, 3 or 4 lectures. They are published in a book form, Nationalism. Also, in many of his songs, a long back, he gave some hints, gave some ideas what postmodernism is propagating these days in literature. So, I know about Bangla literature. You can see in your mother tongue, maybe Tamil, Telugu, or Punjabi, or Gujarati, Rajasthani, Hindi, Urdu, wherever, you have to find out how the critique of modernity can be done. Uh, I can just say one thing. This is the last question, so I'm saying one thing. Dipesh Chakraborty once wrote to me that once the ancient Greek thinker, what was the name? He discovered liver. With the help of liver in physics, with little force, you can lift a heavy thing. Hmm. That is the technology of liver. He said, the Greek thinker said, give me a place. I remember the name Archimedes. Archimedes said that give me a place outside the earth where I can place my finger, and with my own hands I will be able to lift the whole earth. This is called Archimedean point. Similarly, I will say in the literature, try to find out a place, a space, Archimedean point, it is called, outside Western modernity. Find out a place. And only then, on the basis of that place, standing there, you will be able to evaluate the whole Western modernity. Give me a place, give me an Archimedean point outside Western modernity. Maybe a tribal culture, maybe a pre-modern, before the colonial modernity came to India, before the British came to India. Find out some Archimedean point in Hindi literature or Urdu literature or Tamil literature or Bangla literature or whatever. And from that point, it will be possible to look at the Western modernity as a whole, to evaluate it. Otherwise, you are within the global Western modernity. And if you are within the global Western modernity, you cannot evaluate it. And explain postmodernist views on human nature. Very simply, I already said that human nature, this concept is a modernist concept. Postmodernism immediately will say that human nature is a construction. It is constructed by the dominant discourse, institutions, and power. There is no universal human nature. The African pygmy people, or the Americans, or the American Red Indians, or our Indian Santals, tribal people, different human beings have different human nature. It is not given. No essence is given. Nothing is pre-given. You are constructing it through the dominant discourse, power, institution, and language. That is the postmodern view of human nature. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So now we go to the last session of this talk, of this lecture. I would like to propose a vote of thanks. I'm sure you all will agree when I say it was a true honor to hear Professor Pradip Basu speak. His lucid arguments, his enthusiastic delivery, and his command over the topic, as well as the depth of his knowledge, were inspiring. I thank the president of AIRS, Ariba Ahsanat, for conceptualizing, realizing, and bringing to fruition this lecture. I'd also like to thank Professor Pradip Basu for taking time off his busy schedule to join us and give us this enlightening lecture. I thank all the members who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible, making special mention of Aruna Anil Kumar, Mohammad Sujauddin, Ajab Rangunwala, Manasa Yu, and Evangeline. We at AIRS are grateful for the support, enthusiasm, and determination of the speaker, participants, and the team at AIRS. Under the unfailing guidance of our President Ariba Ahsanat Mozammer, this event was possible. Thank you, good night, and we hope to see you all on next session on July 7th at 5 p.m. on the topic Dynamics of Party Switching in India by Lata Kevi. Have a great night ahead. Till next time, bye bye. Good night.